Welcome to the Orange Coast Unitarian Universalist Church on Zoom. My name is Jan Mabey, and I am your worship associate today. I am joined by Reverend Sian Wiltshire, our minister, and Beth Syverson, our director of music ministries, in welcoming you this morning. Reverend Judy, our director of religious education, already held classes for the children earlier this morning, and she will offer one for our youth after the service. We respectfully recognize that our church rests on Ahachiman and Tongva land. I would like to invite you to open the chat box and say hello this morning. As Unitarian Universalists, we have many different beliefs, but we are one loving community. We are bound together not by a common set of rules or beliefs, but rather a covenant. A covenant is simply a promise that whatever our beliefs, we accept one another and encourage each other in spiritual growth. We affirm that all life has inherent value and that all existence is interconnected. We strive for justice and compassion in our deeds and relationships, and we are committed to creating a welcoming community without regard to the trades that sometimes divide people. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you will find it here. After the service, we will be placing everyone who remains into Zoom breakout rooms for 20 minutes of social time. Everyone is welcome to join in, and it's a great way to get to know the people in our congregation. Our worship begins with the lighting of our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. And as we light it, we see our unison affirmation. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, we invite you to light it with us. Please join me now as we begin. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another, this we affirm together. Please join the choir in singing along with this pre-pandemic video of our 7 principles.
Inherent worth and dignity of every person. Inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity,
Oh, yes, remember those days we were together, choir singing? I love those chants that Beth and many of our people put together to help us remember our 7 principles. And we're going to be talking about our 7 principles today a little bit, so I thought it'd be a nice refresher for you. So let's begin our worship this morning with these words by Reverend Stephen Kendrick. We are here to face the truth about ourselves, about this faith we love, and the ways it presently serves others and the world, as well as to open ourselves to ways it can better and more joyfully reflect our potential and core values. We want to know the ways we are bound to one another, as well as to larger religious movements normally beyond our sight and vision. We say we are open and diverse, yet it is too easy to feel stuck in old paths and stubborn habits, reflecting not so much tradition as our comfort. We want to answer the call to service, to a world that needs our message, our hope, our revived energy. We are gathered to learn, to unlearn, to hear, and to move forward. Amen.
Ahmad Arbery, you went for a run, 'cause you probably felt free. Ahmad Arbery, your run had an end that nobody could see. Little black boys don't run outside or play with water guns at night. They run away from red and white, blue light. Little black boys don't go to stores or use their pockets anymore. Can someone tell them what they're living for? They want more. Oh, Breonna Taylor, I bet your sleep felt so peaceful and pure. Oh, Breonna Taylor, your peace was ended by police burglars. Streets alone at night. They turn their cameras on when they see white. And little black girls don't open doors or stand near windows anymore. Can someone tell them what they're living for? They need more. They need more. Are scared, their parents feel so unprepared. The world sees black no matter what you wear. So little black boys and girls don't cry. We'll fight to find an alibi so you can go outside and never die. We will try. We will try. We need more. We need more.
It's a powerful song. It's been a powerful week. As many of you are aware, of the conviction of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. This week came out. So I'm going to read you this morning. Our reading is a statement made by President Obama and Mrs. Obama in response to that conviction. They bring up some really interesting points. They wrote this: "Today, a jury in Minneapolis did the right thing. For almost a year, George Floyd's death under the knee of a police officer has reverberated around the world, inspiring murals and marches, sparking conversations in living rooms and new legislation. But a more basic question has always remained: would justice be done? In this case, at least, we have our answer. But if we're being honest with ourselves, we know that true justice is about much more than a single verdict in a single trial. True justice requires that we come to terms with the fact that Black Americans are treated differently every day. It requires us to recognize that millions of our friends, family, and fellow citizens live in fear that their next encounter with law enforcement could be their last. And it requires us to do the sometimes thankless, often difficult, but necessary work of making the America we know more like the America we believe in. While today's verdict may have been a necessary step on the road to progress, it was far from a sufficient one. We cannot rest. We will need to follow through with the concrete reforms that will reduce and ultimately eliminate racial bias in our criminal justice system. We will need to redouble efforts to expand economic opportunities for those communities that have been too long marginalized. As we continue the fight, we can draw strength from the millions of people, especially young people, who have marched, protested, and spoken up over the last year, shining a light on inequity and calling for change. Justice is closer today, not simply because of this verdict, but because of their work. In a spirit of silence to consider, what reforms do you think need to happen? What would that look like in order to bring out racial justice in this country? What reforms do you think need to happen? So please join me in a spirit of silence for just a few moments as we consider. I invite you now to join Beth in singing.
Fill my days with blessed unrest, and mine hearts with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. Oh, I am waking up to find my world between the dying and being reborn. I see what is and I see what could be. Can't close my eyes again and go back to sleep. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. How can I change our course? I'm just a lonely voice. Wish I could lose myself in all the noise. But if we all would rise, a generation proud with a mighty song, we could turn this world around. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. So when our time is through, I want to know we did what we came to do for the future ones. So in our darkest days, may we all be strong and give our lives so life may go on. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. Fill my days with blessed unrest and my nights with dreams of justice. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide. Make me a vessel for the turning of the tide.
So I'm just curious if any of you recognize this book here. Some of you might. If you're newer, you might not. It's one of our hymnals that has a bunch of our hymns in it. See, that's actually not what I wanted to point out to you all. I wanted you to notice that the title of it is Singing the Living Tradition. The living tradition. This is something that it's words that get bandied around, and you see them every once in a while in our tradition. And you might think, oh, that's just a really lovely title, but that's actually a rather deep theological concept, or if you prefer, an ecclesiastical or church concept. So let me explain about what the living tradition means. Most religions claim that revelation occurred at a very specific time and place. For example, Jesus, about 2,000 years ago in particular, since a lot of this stuff comes out of the Judeo-Christian thing, and that the Bible is the only revelation beyond Jesus himself, right? So after that, it's really only a matter of interpretation of that revelation that might actually change, but revelation only happened in that one point in time. This idea that revelation only occurred at one point in time keeps many religions, not all of them, but keeps many of them, honestly, I think, pretty stagnant when it comes to change. And just taking an example from the Catholic Church, right? The biggest change that they ever did was called Vatican II in 1965. And the big controversy that they struggled with was turning the priest around to preach to the congregation, as well as being able to do communion in the vernacular rather than in Latin. Now, That's basically the biggest change in about 1,500 years since they adopted the creed and solidified the books of the New Testament. Now, it would be really pejorative to call these religions dead, so I'm not going to do that. But in contrast, Unitarian Universalism is what's called a living tradition. That is, we are actually required to change and to grow. And we've actually done a ton of it already in the decades since joining the two denominations of Unitarianism and Universalism in 1961, right? And because there's been so much change in our culture too, right? We've embraced women's rights, then gay rights and LGBTQ rights, fighting for racial justice, becoming interfaith and no faith. And each time we learn more about how we wanted to be in the world, how we changed, how we grew, we became more of who we really are. And let me tell you, it was not easy. There wasn't always agreement about this. There were lots of discussions going on, and that's our democracy, right? That's our fifth principle, that we promote democracy. So we discussed things a lot. Now, I do want to help you understand. For some of you, this is old hat and everything, but I recognize that we have a lot of newer people within our church, and so I'm just going to go into lecture mode just a little bit here and explain a little bit about how Unitarian Universalist churches work. All right. I'm going to talk about polity. That's a really fun word, polity. It's a fancy word for how do we govern ourselves. So first you have to understand that we are an association of congregations. Technically, we're not really a denomination. A lot of people don't like that word denomination, as it implies that there's a sort of central institutional system that tells us what to do. But that's not how we work. We are instead congregationalist in the way that we govern, which means each congregation decides for itself and funds itself about what it will or will not do. Now, we're not the only ones who do that. There are many other different denominations out there that are congregationalists. But what this means is that our Unitarian Universalist Association, right, in Boston supports the congregations. They may come up with programs, they may put together hymnals, they help with ministerial searches and all sorts of things, but they will never require a congregation to use their services or come and say, you have to do these things. Except that we have agreed on a couple of things. In order to be part of this association of congregations, we agree to do two important things. One is we agree to actually send them funds every year, right? It's sort of like an annual pledge. Like we're in the middle of our pledge drive. They also have an annual pledge and we give them a percentage of our budget. The second is that we you know them as our 7 principles and 6 sources. And Beth actually put them in chants, right? And we sang in our opening hymn there, at least the 7 principles she did. So, and if you want to know more about the 7 principles and 6 sources, I'm going to put them up eventually here on the screen, but you can also go to the UUA, just type in principles UUA and it'll come right up, or sources UUA and it'll come right up. So I'll put that out there. Each year, when we get together and vote on something, to change those bylaws. So that's part of what we do, right? So in fact, these 7 principles and 6 sources are part of Article 2 of the bylaws of the UUA. And it begins, we, the member congregations of the UUA, affirm and promote these things, right? Okay, you with me so far? Not too much lecture there. All right. And here's the thing, you may not know it, but our principles have changed over the years because we've changed. We've voted to change Article 2 of the bylaws to change our principles and our sources, and not without a lot of heated discussion along the way. So let me give you some examples, because I think it's kind of fun to see how did we get to where we are today and how does this all look? All right, so in 1961, when we first decided to merge the two denominations, we really struggled with finding a common ground, right? Like you had the Unitarians they had the people basically, and they tended toward more atheism and agnosticism, not exclusively, but tended that way. The Universalists had a lot of money, but they also tended toward theism. The Unitarians tended to be white collar workers. Universalists tended to be blue collar, was kind of their history, their culture. So these were two very different cultures, even though they had a lot in common. There were two really different cultures coming together. And what they came up with were actually 6 principles, okay? So 6 principles, let me see if I can get up, there we go. There's our 6 principles originally from 1961. Now I'm gonna read these out loud because some of you can't read them because you're on a phone or something like that. So I'm gonna read them out loud, but you might check them and notice some of the language you use and how you might feel about that language. So the first principle that they had was to strengthen one another in a free and disciplined search for truth as the foundation of our religious fellowship. Number 2, to cherish and spread the universal truths taught by the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorially summarized as the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. Third, to affirm and defend and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships. Number 4, to implement our vision of one world by striving for a world community founded on ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace. 5, to serve the needs of member churches and fellowships, to organize new churches and fellowships, and to extend and strengthen liberal religion. Number 6, to encourage cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. So what do you think about that? Kind of interesting, right? You hear echoes of our current principles in there, some of our sources even in there. Now, the controversy, that the very first controversy I've actually highlighted in there where it says under the Judeo-Christian heritage. The very first controversy that we struggled with was that little word. It was the or our. And in fact, that was what came down to whether or not we were going to merge as two traditions. There was literally a 2 a.m. battle and finally made a decision and got people bought into it. But you had one side who wanted it to say our and another side who wanted it to say the. Isn't it amazing what people will argue over? But, you know, people feel strongly about these things, right? So one little word almost tanked our new fledgling denomination. All right, so the next thing that actually happened that you might have noticed when you were listening to me reading those, or if you read them, was that there's a fair bit of, what's the word I want to say? Sexist language, pretty much going on in these. So let me see here if I can do this. There we go. So I'm underlining the words that people were pointing out, like, okay. And if you remember that during this time in the 1970s, this was like the women's liberation movement was going around, and they were pointing this out, like, come on, like, this is just too much, right? And we understand that this use of man was meant to be humanity or, you know, all people, and yet it still is sexist language. So in 1981, the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation brought a sort of desexed version of the principles before the General Assembly, and it created just a firestorm of contention around changing them because, oh my goodness, how could we dare change these things? Now, I find it kind of amusing. I think that anybody, I would hope that most people would today look at this and go, yeah, no, I don't like that language either, and that we would do it. But back then, it created a lot of controversy. So the very wise president of the Women's Federation, her name was Denise Davidoff, I believe she passed away fairly recently, she said, hold on. She said, you know, let's take a step back. Let's look at this in a larger picture. She realized it was time to take a really long look at the six principles, and did they still truly reflect who we were, what needed to be changed? And it wasn't just around the language, but truly creating a statement, as she said, with religious integrity, intellectual coherence, and literary quality. She asked for and received a year to study these issues. And because of her insight, in 1984, the principles and sources, almost as we know them today, were adopted with an almost unanimous vote. So by taking the time to just really listen, to invite participation and to reflect, we created something that has become a huge part of our faith tradition for the last 40 years. However, I will say that almost immediately, the pagans and environmentalists in particular noticed that there was a missing source, right? So we have our 6 sources, right? Well, this one, they said we need to add in one more. We forgot to look at the earth, right? So they talked about the spiritual teachings and earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. So that was added on in 1987, pretty much, I think, by unanimous vote. It was pretty straightforward, which I think was really cool that they added that in there. And in fact, there actually has been a more recent change that honestly, I didn't even notice. I'm sorry, I wish I had actually paid attention to this and I didn't notice it, but it was actually kind of interesting. So if you remember in our 6 sources, okay, as I have them listed there, right? In fact, if you notice in the second one where it says words and deeds of prophetic women and men. Now notice it says women and men. Now that in and of itself is really pretty cool. And a lot of the women in our denomination fought to put women first, because most of the time, right, when you hear that phrase, it's men and women, but they fought to have that be put that in that particular way. But do you see a problem with that now? Right? Okay, what if you don't identify as male or female? So in 2017, in order to be inclusive, it was changed to people. That was just 4 years ago. Now, this actually created some controversy, not because people didn't want to be inclusive, but a lot of those women who fought to have women first, right, felt like they had worked long and hard for that. And they didn't want to give that up. But I can understand that. And we also grow and we learn and we change. Now, there was an attempt, by the way, I don't know if you're also aware, about the same time. Let's see if I can change the slide here. There we go. All right. Was that there was an attempt to change our first principle to be about the inherent dignity and worth of every being rather than every person. Now that didn't pass. That was actually proposed by people who really believed in animal rights. They wanted to have that in there, but it did not pass. So I want to mention all of this because this is in part what it means to be a living tradition. We know that we don't have all the answers right now, and that we will learn and grow as a people, as a denomination, and hopefully also as a culture. And we have always been on that leading edge of where the culture is, often the way that where it's heading. And it is in fact written into our UUA bylaws that every 15 years at least, we re-examine these principles and sources. And in fact, in 2007, about 14 years ago or so, a committee had been formed to rewrite the principles. A lot of people complain that the principles are they're not very poetic. And so they were put together in a new sort of poetic form. And I'm sorry, I tried to find them, but I couldn't find them anywhere. So I was going to show you what they look like. And I led a discussion about that in my home congregation in Seattle at the time. And what fascinated me was that they really were beautifully written. I wish I had some examples to show you, but they were also worded much more specifically. And that was the big contention that people had. So for example, the one that I remember in particular was that our 7th principle, right, is about the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, right? Now that's often understood as a kind of environmentalist statement, but it doesn't have to be, right? It can talk about our interdependence as a congregation, as a culture. But the way that they rewrote it made it only about the environment. And so every single one of those suggested changes were shot down. And it really did make people realize, we've gotten really kind of attached to our principles and sources. It was kind of interesting to see. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because, well, we're up for another possible change. And this is the proposal for an 8th principle. And we will most likely, per our bylaws, be voting it on in the next 2 years. It's going to be proposed this June, and we have to, according to our bylaws, it has to be passed twice. This effort has been led by two wonderful Unitarian Universalists. One is Paula Cole-Jones, and the other is Bruce Pollock Johnson. So here's what the 8th principle looks like. All right. Whoop, nope, didn't mean to do that. Okay, there we go. Sure, now the computer responds to me. All right, so here it is. To journey toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. What do y'all think about that? I'm just going to read this again. To affirm and promote, to journey towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Now, as you all know, that our denomination and even our church has been wrestling with trying to decenter whiteness, to learn about systemic racism, and to build a more inclusive, beloved community. And the reality is we've been trying to do this for a really, really long time. And the problem is that when this particularly happened, I think it was in the 90s and the early 2000s, is it wasn't really done very well initially. When we first started tackling systemic racism, we tended to look outward and point out racism over there and not necessarily within ourselves and our institutions and really examining that. And there's been huge hurt that's been created because of that and problems that cropped up because of that. So this time, many people are determined. And so the 8th principle was born. And this decades of struggle that I mentioned, I could do a whole sermon on all of that. It's found in this word, accountably dismantle racism and oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Because in the past, we've not really held ourselves accountable. And this has caused problems, as I mentioned. Now, the word accountably has had some heated discussion around it. None of our other principles have any sense of accountability. And there's sort of this, well, how would you make it accountable? You can disagree with our principles. And are you allowed to disagree with this particular principle, right? Another controversy or heated discussion really around this is around the words other oppressions. In this proposal, racism gets called out very specifically and tacked on and other oppressions. And so some people, including some women who are saying, well, what about women's rights? Or LGBTQ activists are saying, well, what about LGBTQ rights? And ableist activists are saying, wait a minute, that is true. This idea of sort of lumping them all into other oppressions, it can feel minimizing. And yet, everybody does recognize the deep-seated challenge that is racism in this country. So you can kind of see where like, this is tough. We have to be figuring it out, right? The third objection to it is that some people argue that our work on anti-oppression and anti-racism is already inherent in our principles, particularly in our 1st, our 6th, and our 7th principles, that it's implied. that it gets to that idea we tend to think more like in general rather than it being too specific. But here's the thing. Maybe it's time we get a little more specific. Maybe it's time we had a little teeth to our principles. Because it's pretty easy to let the sort of generalization of our principles feel vague enough that they can be sort of interpreted in a lot of ways and maybe not necessarily hold us accountable. And the proposed 8th principle asks us not to do that. Maybe we need it. Now, there are lots of reasons to object, and there are some people who say it's too wordy, right? I know best response was, I have no idea how I would write a song to that, right? And she knows, is right, like, this is not a good reason to not do it, right? And some say, well, we'd have to print all new materials, and yeah, okay, we would, but those are just inconveniences, right? The question really is, what is the right thing to do? And so this is going to be debated at our General Assembly gathering. This is an annual gathering when all Unitarian Universalists come together at the end of June this year, and you can be a part of it. If you want to be a delegate, you can apply for that. We have a certain number of delegates at the church, and if you want to, let Deborah Quam, our president, know about that if you'd like to be a part of that. As a minister, I'm automatically a delegate. So you might ask, well, how am I going to vote? If it comes up as it is, I will vote for it. I don't really have any huge objections to it. I think it's actually a really interesting challenge for us, and I'm okay with working with that. I have no doubt that it's going to be wordsmithed to death as well, but that's the way that we roll as Unitarian Universalists. Now, in fact, some congregations have actually already adopted the 8th principle or something like it, modifying it maybe as they saw fit. They did a lot of discussion talking about it and decided to adopt it for their own churches. Because remember, we're Congregationalists, we can do that. And if this congregation wants to do that, I'm happy to help with leading a discussion on it. We are a living tradition, right? This is part of how we grow. We have to let go of what was and embrace what could be. Remember Kendrick in our opening words, he said, it's too easy to feel stuck in old paths and stubborn habits, reflecting not so much tradition as our comfort. But I will say this, I'd like to propose something a little bit more radical, because my challenge with the 8th principle is that I don't think it's a big enough change. We're about to celebrate our 60th anniversary as a denomination of the merger. 60 years ago, we didn't really know who we were, and we've been honing in on that ever since, right? Back then, it was a bit like asking people in their teens, so write up a description of who you are. And they might have some good ideas for that time, but think about how you've grown in the last decades and who you are now, and I'd be willing to bet that you would write something different. Maybe not wholly different, but now you have a deeper understanding of who you are. And it's the same with us. We're 60 years older. And I think it's time to take a step back. This will be hard, much easier to change a few words or tack on another source or principle. It's much harder to take a step back and ask, do these principles still stand the test of time? What is missing? What no longer challenges us, but is just comfortable, like a well-worn glove? I think it's time to ask these questions because anti-racism and anti-oppression work aren't the only things that have deepened in our faith and understanding of who we are. So for example, the last 20 to 25 years, our denomination has embraced a theology or philosophy, if you prefer, of love. And that word love doesn't exist in our principles. I think we need a grounding theology if we're going to do anti-oppression work. What else might be missing? Who and what we are called to now as a people. We are a living tradition. We are growing and becoming something new. And perhaps it's time to thank with deep gratitude our 7 principles and sources and to say goodbye and let them evolve into something even greater that calls us once again to become even more. We need more. And I hope we're brave enough to do something more because that is what it will take. It'll take courage. And it can feel overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, where do we even start? But it's so much easier to just stay with what's safe But if what is safe is no longer working, we need to muster up our courage and move forward into that unknown. And we've always come out the other side of it better for it. And our US culture right now is trying to do something very similar. If we can find meaning in the death of George Floyd, it might be that finally people in power are recognizing that we need an overhaul of our policing system, our criminal justice system, and our political voting system, right? I mean, let's face it, the whole system needs an overhaul. We as a nation need to take a step back and see what is and is no longer serving us about our Constitution, our laws, our culture, and create something new, evolve into something new, to be that courageous. Because if you want to know why civilizations rise and fall, it's whether or not they can evolve or whether they stay with what is comfortable. And we want more. We need more. We need more. We can begin with our own denomination. However you feel about the eighth principle, change is coming. And we will evolve, we will learn, we will grow from the experience. There will be heated discussion. Some people might get their feelings hurt. But democracy is not about pleasing everyone. We can't be afraid of changing, of transforming, of evolving. And here's the thing, isn't it kind of exciting? I mean, we get to change. We get to change. We're not like most religions stuck in the past, holding on to what was, like some football star remembering their glory days. We get to look to the future and plan how we will create that beloved community we all long for. And remember, transformation is about changing the core of who you are. It's about becoming more of who you are, more of who we are called to be. And I love that we will, as always, walk together, hand in hand, into this new future. Let us join our choir in singing.
Hand in hand, stone by stone, help me build our sacred home. Hand in hand, stone by stone, help me build our sacred home.
This house is built on love. This house is built with faith. This house will stand for good forever and a day.
Come on down this path with me to the place where the road ends. Beyond, beyond, beyond. Hand in hand, stone by stone, help me build our sacred home. Hand in hand, stone by stone, help me build our sacred home.
People gonna see us speaking out. People gonna see us holding strong. Everybody gonna sing out loud. Come on, sing along.
Come on down this path with me to the place where the road ends. Beyond, beyond, beyond. Hand in hand, stone by stone, help me build our sacred home. Hand in hand, stone by stone, help me build our sacred home.
It's a church of the open mind. It's a church of the loving heart. It's a church of the helping hand. Everybody take a part.
Come on down this path with me to the place where the road ends. Beyond, beyond, beyond. Hand in hand, stone by stone, help me build our sacred home. Hand in hand, stone by stone, help me build our sacred home. Help me build our sacred home.
Unitarian Universalist congregations are fully self-supporting, meaning that members and friends raise all funds for the operating budget, ministries, and programs of the church. We are ever grateful for the gifts of time, treasure, and talent. OCUUC amplifies that spirit of generosity by sharing half of the plate we receive with an organization that shares our values. This month, we are supporting Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministries of California. The Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry of California is a grassroots-led organization dedicated to lifting up impacted communities and those who share our values. You can learn more about this effort by going to their website at uujmca.org. There are multiple ways in which you can support the church and this organization. You can mail a check, you can go through our website, use an app called Give Plus, or by texting. The choice is yours. All the information is on our website should you need it. As always, thank you for your generosity.
Well, you better listen, my sisters and brothers, because if you do, you can hear there are voices still calling across the years, and they're all crying across the ocean, and they're crying across the land, and they will till we all come to understand. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us are chained. None of us are free. And there are people still in darkness, and they just can't see the light. If you don't say it's wrong, then that says it's right. We got to try to feel for each other. Let our brothers know that we care. Got to get the message, send it out loud and clear. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us are chained. None of us are free. Now I swear your salvation isn't too hard to find. None of us can find it on our own. We've got to join together in spirit, heart, and mind, so that every soul who's suffering will know that we're not alone. Oh, none of us are free. None of us are free, y'all. None of us are free, and one of us are chained. None of us are free. If you just look around you, you're gonna see what I say. 'Cause the world is getting smaller each passing day. Now it's time to start making changes, and it's time for us all to realize that the truth is shining bright right before our eyes. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us is chained. None of us are free. Oh, none of us are free. Oh, my. None of us are free. No, none of us are free. One of us is chained. One of us are free. None of us are free. None of us. None of us are free. One of us is chained. None of us are free.
Please join in singing We Gather Together, a song that puts our intentions into words and expresses our gratitude for the many gifts we share.
We gather together, we gather as one, for peace, love, and justice for everyone. We give from our hearts to show that we care. We can change lives with what we share.
Now is that time when we join together to honor the important people and events in our lives. And you are invited to join, whether you're a member, a friend, or a visitor, to participate in this weekly ritual we call Joys and Sorrows. So maybe you're holding something in your heart, moments from the last days, weeks, or hours, something that maybe it's struck you at your core. If you'd like to honor such a profound joy or sorrow, you are invited to do so. We invite you to light a candle at home if you have a candle you'd like to do that with. It's a wonderful way to honor what you hold in your heart. If you'd like to share your joy or sorrow with the congregation, we invite you to write that in the chat. So let's just take a few moments in contemplation as Beth plays some music, and I'll begin to read the joys and sorrows out loud. And I ask you if you could hold off any response to joys and sorrows to help me not miss any, because they go by really, really quickly in the chat. Just hold off on expressing a response to a joy or sorrow until we're finished. Thank you. Cody Moore has let us know that he's joyful for his kickball team, and also that if I'm late to a UU Zoom church, I don't go to hell. He's grateful for this community and he loves the potential 8th principle. Linda Clough sent me a message of great joy to see 2 of her grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild in person and to give live hugs. Yes, what a blessing. I'm so glad everybody's doing better on that. And Sandy Martin sent me an email. She says, beginning in May, she says, my son-in-law, Dave, has a new job. So he and Sandy's daughter, Melissa, will be fully employed, which is a huge relief to that family. How wonderful. Sandy goes on to say, this also means full-time employment for Grandy and Grandpa as full-time caregivers for 2 online school grandkids. You are a blessing to your grandchildren, Sandy and Don. And Jean Chris says she's excited to be heading for Laughlin, Nevada for post-vaccine outing. I know we're all starting to do that now, right? Starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. So Cody says, Cody, that's Jordan. Sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, I was like, I know that name, Cody Moore. That was Jordan who says that. And Adam Goldman says, my friend Amber lost her boyfriend to COVID. Oh, Adam, I'm so sorry. He was in his late 50s. It's a reminder that it's still out there. It's still out there and causing harm. And Francie has a concern having minor surgery for basal cell carcinoma on her nose this Friday. It's an easy procedure. And she says, sending good wishes are very welcome. Thank you. So reach out to Francie and wish her all the best. I'm glad it's an easy procedure. Barbara Schilling says she's grateful that she was able to visit her mom for the first time in over a year. able to see many other family members. Hannah says she's grateful for all of you holding space together each week and so thankful that she was able to get her second vaccine shot and that everyone in her family has been vaccinated. Congratulations, Hannah. That is a nice feeling. Karen says joy of being able to take her 10-year-old grandson to Epcot Center in Florida. She said it was just the two of us, so now we have shared memories and inside jokes. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, but you're a good, fun grandma. And Maureen has a joy that both of her daughters are planning to come visit from Europe this summer after a year and a half of not seeing them. Oh, what a blessing. And Alex has much gratitude to the UU Men's Fellowship in San Diego for putting together the men's retreat this weekend. Yay, men's retreat. Sounds like it was absolutely wonderful. Oh, and Sunny, oh, I'm sorry that her younger grandson's roommate has COVID. And Liam has 2 finals next week, no vaccination. Oh, let's hold. There's so many young people who don't have it yet. Let's keep them safe too. Tracy says she's lit a candle for her brother who is going in for bypass surgery on Wednesday. He is a trail runner with a strong heart, so the outcome looks good. Whew. Okay, now we'll hold him in our hearts too. Tatiana has a joy that David and her got their first Moderna shot on Friday. Yay, more people getting vaccinated. That's what we want. And Bree offers up a sorrow for her aunt who's suffering complications after a brain aneurysm surgery. Oh, yeah, we send hugs to your family in Ohio too, Bree. I'm so sorry. Oh, that's hard. And Sarah Hunter offers up that her sister Mary is retiring this week. The last of the Swift siblings are all retiring. Isn't that interesting? I hope we get to have some fun together. And Peggy says she just lost her favorite uncle. Oh, Peggy, I'm so sorry. She's sending out sorrow for his wife and kids and relief that he's passed on after long health struggles. Oh, I'm sorry. We hold both of that. All right, and Ginny offers up a joy that she's going to go visit her mom in October. You notice that we have all these things that we're holding, the joys of having vaccines and seeing people, and the sorrows that this is still affecting us. So let's keep everybody safe out there as best we can. And also hold that joy, that relief that we get to be with our loved ones. It's a both and. All right, let us hold and love all the joys and celebrations, all the hurts and sadness, whether they've been spoken or they were silently held within. Let our joys remind us to be thankful, and our concerns remind us to hope, and our sorrows remind us to connect with one another. Because all these moments remind us that they're universal, right? We're not alone. I invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer. This was sent to me, thank you, from Doug Owen. It's from the Reverend Frederick Gillis, who's a former minister in one of our Rhode Island churches. He wrote this: "May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us now and always. Blessed be, and amen."
Let us join together as we extinguish the flame of our chalice and say together, we extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are a congregation made up of people who all believe differently. And yet, when we are gathered together, we make up one loving community. We need not think alike to love alike. If you're a guest, a visitor, or someone who has not yet been known to us, I invite you to become a part of this beloved community. We encourage you to write your name in the chat and where you're from so we can welcome you. If you'd like to know more about our church, please contact us at hello@ocuuc.org, and we will help you get connected. In addition, we invite you to sign up for our weekly email called blast@ocuuc.org. We want everyone to feel a part of this beloved community. So please reach out and we will help you get connected. After the benediction, we will have a short period where everyone can wave and say hello. Then those that remain will be put into Zoom breakout groups for 20 minutes. We invite you to check in and get to know the people in your group and welcome any visitors.
And of course, announcements, you can see there's lots of things that are always going on here at the church. All of this is still on Zoom, except for our choir is starting to do hybrid rehearsals, which is kind of exciting. And we are starting to get the technology in to do hybrid meetings too. So if you're interested in holding a hybrid or in-person meeting, let us know and we can see what we can work out. But we're slowly working those. There's lots of things. We're going to be telling you about that in the coming weeks. And there are sort of rules that we have to follow. So we'll be telling you about also coming up soon to be hybrid worship. So keep tuned, read your blast, because we'll be putting information there over the next few weeks. The other thing I want to really mention to you all, our pledge drive, right? This is our annual pledge drive. It's wrapping up. So please get your pledge in. If you're like me, like you forget, you get off on things, you get distracted. Oh, I really want to talk about that 8th principle, or I want to do something like that. What I do is I put an alarm on my iPhone. If you have a smartphone, put an alarm there to say, hey, go make your pledge. And you can do it online. You can just simply go to our website and there's a place there under giving, I think. You can make your pledge. It's really simple. It takes all of like 5 minutes to do it. Either that or send it in if you were sent the card. So if you haven't been sent a card and you want one, you can either go online and pledge or just contact me and I'll get you in touch with the people that will help you with that. So thank you all. Thank you all. Everyone who has pledged, thank you, thank you, thank you for doing that. This is how we are gonna be sustained as a church. So bless your hearts. Thank you so much. Yes, Sandy Martin has put her email. She's the person in charge of the pledge. If you have any questions, concerns, or you don't know quite what to do, or you want a card, contact Sandy. She's the one I'll put you in touch with if you were to contact me. So thank you, Sandy, for all of your hard work. You and your team doing a wonderful job. You are awesome. This is a really difficult job and so grateful that she does this. So thank you again. All right. Let us join Beth in singing our benediction.
Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me.
All right, everyone. I think we need more. And the only way to get there is to evolve. Let's have the courage to do so. This service is over. Let our service continue.